What's up everybody, Patty Schnee here again today, back at it again with another video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from Wolves at the Gate, Eclipse. Now, in my experiences with Wolves at the Gate, the biggest critique I've had with them is that all of their music sounds the same. And yes, I have listened to a lot of their music, at least 2 or 3 of their albums leading up to Eclipse. And as I have lived with this band and really listened to them, I've realized that critique, in concerns to all bands, can be quite an ignorant critique if the person who's listening to the band does not actually listen to the band that much. Like, say, when I first heard Seven Dust, my critique of them was, well, all their music sounds the same. But of course that was the same when I heard Breaking Benjamin, and now Breaking Benjamin is one of my favorite bands. So I think the critique of, well, all their music sounds the same is a terrible critique, because all their music sounds the same because you haven't listened to it and you haven't really given it much of a chance. If somebody really digs into an artist and really listens to them, they'll realize that there are a lot of minute distinctions that distinguish each song from each other. Now, this album, Eclipse by Wolves at the Gate, does a good job of distinguishing songs between each other. It does a good job of having distinct hooks and distinct choruses that are different from every other song. While I think the critique of Wolves at the Gate's music sounding similar does have some leeway to it. It does have some reasoning behind it, because a lot of their music does sound similar. However, if you listen to it, you will see the small distinctions. And I think one of the biggest things that Eclipse does is it has a lot of distinctions between each song. And each song, in and of itself, is very unique and very distinct. And that is one of the biggest things I like about this album. Now, honestly, to tell you the truth, leading up to this album, I wasn't like overhyped for it. I wasn't like, oh, Wolves at the Gate new album, yeah, let's go. I wasn't like, I heard a few of the singles that came out, and I was like, okay, they're good. But in order for you to totally like a song, you have to let it grow on you. Re-listening to those singles while I was listening to the full album, they definitely grew on me, and they definitely added more to how much I like them. And I think the singles that were released, it was a good decision to release those, because I do believe that those are some of the strongest on the album. I do believe that those are some of the best on the album. Some things that this album does very well is it has some great intros. I was reading about the band, and I found out that there's not just one guy who does vocals. There's 3 guys in this band that do vocals. And having that many talented vocalists in one band is pretty amazing. Obviously, it's nice in a post-hardcore / metalcore band to have an unclean vocal guy and a clean vocal guy. Unless you're, if you're Michael Barnes, you can do uncleans and cleans at the same time. But obviously when they're touring live, they need somebody to be able to sing the cleans and somebody to be able to sing the uncleans, and to have to do those both together really wears on the voice. And then you have the backing vocals. And so that's very well done. I like how all of their voices blend together and they sound very similar, and it just works very well. Excuse me for a second, I'm trying to pull up the track listing so I can talk about each song. Now, in this album review, I'm not going to go super in depth on this album. I'm just going to kind of give you my general thoughts overall on the album, as well as maybe give you a few of my thoughts on my favorite tracks. Now, I do think that this album really starts off very well. And I've been wondering lately whether certain songs being released as a single change how I like them. Because I've been able to live with the songs The Cure, A Voice in the Violence, Drifter. I've been able to live with those songs a little bit longer than all the other songs on this album. And I've given those songs a lot more time to kind of seep in. And they're definitely some of my favorite off the album. And I'm just wondering whether that's because they're released as singles and I've been listening to them over and over, or whether it's because they're actually good songs, or is it because the good songs are released as singles? I mean, that makes the most sense. You want to release your best songs as singles. However, there are some songs that weren't singles that really caught me, I mean, not off guard, but they really caught my attention. And one of them being Face to Face. Now, this song in particular, see, I was wondering whether I really like this song just because it has strings in it. And I think that definitely has something to do with it. If you know me, I'm a sucker for the strings. So Face to Face is one of one of the only songs on this album that has strings. And it's the main song on this album that has strings at the forefront. And I really like that. It's got a nice string section towards the middle of the song. And it really breaks up the rest of the song. Now, if you've never listened to metalcore or post-hardcore, you definitely need to get a little in tune to Wolves at the Gate style. It's definitely pretty heavy. It's a lot of shouty vocals. It's a lot of da 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 da. And then there's a lot of nice melodies. As far as this album goes, it's got some of the best melodies that the band has ever put out as of lately. I mean, the band has quite a few amazing songs in their discography, but just a lot of these songs on here have a very good melody. In particular, A Voice in the Violence has a great melody during its verses. I really like how that sounds. Now, getting down to the later tracks, Eclipse, in my opinion, is kind of a long, drawn-out track, and I think the album starts to come to a standstill towards the middle of this album. It's not as smooth with its transitions between tracks. And some of the tracks kind of drag on just a tiny bit. In particular, like I said, Eclipse. Eclipse is a very beautiful sounding track, and it's very well done, but it doesn't really have much of a hook that really could sink its claws into you. You know, that's not to say it's a terrible song, but a lot of Wolves at the Gate's music is like this, where their music doesn't have a distinct hook necessarily. That totally just repeats itself and really gets into you, and it's not super catchy, but all their music is very well done, and it's still very melodic, and that's one thing that I really like about this band, and especially this album in particular, is they don't skimp on the melodic side of their music. One of my biggest critiques of metalcore in general is when you have these amazing guitars and you have amazing instrumentals, and then this guy comes in and he just goes, and it doesn't add anything to the song. If anything, it makes the song worse, and I would wish that the song would just be instrumentals. I would name drop August Burns Red, although I probably have a few people who watch me that are huge fans of August Burns Red, so I'm not going to name drop them here, but I guess I kind of did just name drop them. Okay, well, you get what I mean. August Burns Red being one of the biggest offenders of that, in my opinion, where they have awesome instrumentals, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a great song. It's like there's no hook. There's no melody. I like melodic music. And even screaming can be done in a melodic way. And this album is a great, great example of that, as well as Eminence's latest album, Turn the Light On. They do that a lot. So later on in this album, there are a few songs that kind of remind me of other bands and other songs that I've listened to before. I'm not calling Wolves at the Gate. They're obviously not imitators of other people, but you can hear just the influences of the genre and a lot of the tracks towards the end. I feel like a lot of the first few tracks are a lot more unique, and towards the end it gets a little, just a tiny bit stale, But the C in between sounds a lot like Attalus. If you've never heard of Attalus, it's a band that I listen to that has a lot of speaking kind of vocals, and there's a lot of that in the C in between. And Attalus has a whole album talking about, like, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like Shipwreck, or it's talking about being out to sea. And so this song in particular really just reminds me of that. As well as some of the vocals in, I don't know if it's Counterfeit. It's either Alone, Counterfeit, or Blessings and Curses. I don't think it's Blessings and Curses. I think it's either Alone or Counterfeit. Some of the vocals in those tracks, they do remind me a little bit of Architects, as well as the unclean vocals remind me of Architects. Now, not the overall sound and not the overall song, just a few lines, just a few lines of the vocals remind me of Architects. You could call me crazy if you want, but that's just what I hear a little bit. Now there is a little bit of guitar work in this album. I honestly did not expect there to be any guitar work in this album, but the guitar work, or the solos that are in this album, they really help the songs very well, and they surprised me a little bit. They broke up the songs, and they just worked. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this album, and it's a breath of fresh air in today's music. Wolves at the Gate, they're not becoming pop. They're not doing anything different, but they are making better music. And this album in particular is definitely one of the best albums they've ever made. The Cure, Face to Face, A Voice in the Violence, those three songs in particular, right off the bat, are just so catchy and they have such great meaning that you could literally just overanalyze them all the day long. All the day long. I might have said this at the beginning, but as I said, this isn't an in-depth review of this because I have not listened to this album like 5 times. To tell you the truth, I've only listened to this album once, and I already see how great this album is. Definitely something to go back to, but there's so much more music for me to review, so I gotta get the album, listen to it, review it. So anyways, let me know your thoughts on Eclipse by Wolves at the Gate down in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it. I think I'm going to give this album a solid 9 out of 10. It definitely deserves it. It's such a great album. There's so much dynamics in it, and there's so much stuff to dig into that it's really just honestly hard to talk about it as a whole. But I really encourage you to check this one out. If you're new to my channel, go hit that subscribe button for more stuff like this coming in the future. I do album reviews. I do a lot of rock music reviews, as well as I do a lot of covers, which I have new covers coming out very soon. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you later. Peace out.